I feel like it could honestly be kind of dangerous to make a piece of art that's like, here, this guy is kind of similar to you, and he got out of this situation by murdering people on live TV.
She also had a sex addiction too. She was using
Oh,
sex
yeah.
as a.
I'm not super educated on schizophrenia.
The question I would like to pose to you two today is what do you think the importance is of including themes like mental health issues within film? Who does that help? What are the benefits of that? What are the potential pitfalls of that? Your opinions.
That's a great question. Um, well, a lot of us entertain ourselves with movies and TV shows in general. So that may be our only source of information regarding these mental illnesses. Some of us might not realize that we have that mental illness until we see somebody else showing those same symptoms or, tics as they call them, and then realizing that hey, maybe there's something to this. So I think it is important that they showcase these illnesses on movies that we watch.
Yeah, I think the probably the simplest answer is that film is an art form, and art involves takes on the real world, and mental illness is a part of the real world. So naturally, it's going to end up in film. Um, in terms of the purpose that it can serve, there's a lot of different things that it can do. It can be, it can help you to empathize with people who may have a certain mental illness. It may help you to feel less alone if you have that mental illness. And like Kevin said, you might not know that you have a certain mental illness, and a film can sort of help you understand something that you're going through that, yeah, it may be something more than what you think it is. Like, I know growing up, I had a lot of issues with anxiety, and I didn't know that it was anxiety at the time. I called it the feeling because it didn't make sense. It was a nonsensical feeling of just impending doom. It was generalized, and I would get it at night mostly. I didn't know what was going on. And maybe if I had seen a movie with a character who had generalized anxiety, I would have been able to identify that and address it sooner. So that's just one example.
I love the usage of the word impending doom. That's a good way to describe it.
So just to go a little further with this, what what's the difference between being a person in the audience who sees something on the screen that they can relate to? Why would that be better than just getting a diagnosis from a doctor or doing their own research? Like, what are some potential benefits to seeing it in an art form rather than in a medical setting?
Well, I can attest that being from the older generation, when I was young, um, ADHD wasn't as prevalent. Anxiety wasn't as prevalent. I mean, it was. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't discussed a lot. It was. I guess it was unknown at that time. So, having seen something in the movies along the lines of something that you're going through might help you realize that maybe there is something with what's going on with you, and maybe to see a doctor at that point, because not everybody has that feeling, as you said, impending doom and saying, "Oh, maybe I should go see a doctor. Something's wrong with me." They just think that's normal, or for them at least. So seeing that in betrayed by somebody else in a movie or a TV show shows them that hey, maybe this is not normal. Maybe this is something that's worth checking out. So I think it can lead in positive ways to being diagnosed correctly as a catalyst, I guess, a catalyst to get you to go get checked out.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, especially, or not especially, but in today's society, despite how far we've come with acceptance and understanding of mental illness, it's still very unlikely for people to get help when they have mental illnesses. Um, and it's a lot more likely for someone to go to the movies and watch something that they identify with and resonate with than for them to go see a therapist. Uh, that's a trend that's changing. It's becoming more socially acceptable and accessible to see therapists, but it's just not something that the average person is doing.
Yeah, so to your point there, and let me just say I agree with most of what you guys are saying for sure. But to your point there, I think that a movie certainly isn't going to like help somebody in any other way than making them feel less alone. Like that's the benefit. So if you can see a character going through something that you're also going through and you can relate to that and it makes you feel like, hey, like I appreciate that this is being shown on the screen. Somebody out there understands that people like me feel this way. That's definitely good. But I don't think a movie can is going to treat mental illness. And I know you guys don't think that either. But that's where I think the movie itself would maybe potentially prompt somebody to seek help, especially if help is sought in the actual film. Another thing that I want to touch on here is the fact that I'm a strong believer that like art is subjective, and I truthfully believe that art is like everything. But that being said, when you're dealing with issues like mental illness that plague societies so deeply, like in American society, yes, your art is subjective and you can make the characters do and say whatever you want them to. But if you're trying to put a specific mental illness in there, such as bipolar disorder, I don't really think you can, as a director or writer, you should take creative liberty. You should very much stick to what is understood about that disorder because you can end up, for one, you can end up doing more harm than good. And as a person who's going to be profiting off of this piece of art, it's just respectful to try to stick to the actual, like, by the book definition of the illness and not go crazy with it.
I agree.
Yeah,
Don't glamorize the illness as it is.
definitely. I mean, a lot of the misunderstandings that people have about mental illnesses probably do come from media.
I agree.
Uh, just yeah, and so there's certainly, you mentioned pitfalls earlier. It's definitely just as easy to do harm as it is to do good, by trying to address those topics.
Yeah, like some
For
of the
instance,
films. Go ahead.
yeah. So, well, I actually I'm not super educated on schizophrenia, but if you think about a movie like A Beautiful Mind, um, good movie. I would say it's a good movie. However, I'm not sure that people with schizophrenia actually like have people in their lives in their head that don't exist at all. Do you guys know if that's true?
I'm not qualified enough to speak on that.
I know there's a lot of paranoia. There's a lot of feelings of like, people are out to get me and so on and so forth. But like direct hallucinations of like, yes, this person is sitting next to me and I have conversations with them day in, day out, but they don't really exist. It maybe it happens. I think that movie may have kind of glamorized isn't the right word, but I think it may have made it a more theatric version of what schizophrenia is than the reality.
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
haven't seen that movie in so long.
I haven't even seen that movie. I definitely I'm not qualified to say if schizophrenic people can have like full interact like day-to-day interactions with people that don't exist. So I've never seen that movie, but is that comparable to like Fight Club, the character of Tyler Durden, how the main character basically hallucinates him for the entire film and he's not really there?
Pretty much, yeah. It's just the extent to which he has these hallucinations and where he's even like going places that don't exist. It's like full, complete psychosis, and it, maybe that probably does happen, but I don't think that that's inherent to schizophrenia, and I think that that's probably uh, a very extreme case where you're literally completely detached from any sense of reality. I do know people who have had schizophrenic episodes, and it was not like that. I will just say that much. That's completely anecdotal, but
Addressing mental illness is towing a line for sure. And a mentally ill person in the audience, I feel like, could just as easily see the portrayal of what they view to be themselves on the screen, and that would make them not want to seek help at all. Because they're like, I hate this character. I don't want this to be true about me. There's a lot of similarities between us, but I'm never going to try to get a formal diagnosis because I don't want this to be my life. Especially if the treatment of the mental illness in the film is not something they want to have happen to their own life. So I feel like it could make them just less likely to engage with any type of help.
It could. That's always a possibility. Like you said, art is subjective. I mean, it's also, you know, objective. Depending on how you look at something, one person might interpret something one way as another one might interpret it another way. So showing it in media like movies and TV shows can have a positive effect, but there's always going to be that chance that it's going to have a negative effect, and you just have to see which one outweighs the other, and whether or not it's effective or not.
One slightly different perspective on the purpose that it can serve is not just to help someone who is going through a mental illness to not feel alone, but to also help the people who are around people who are experiencing mental illness, because that is a huge issue of especially people of the older generation having children who are experiencing things that the parents just don't understand. And they may not even believe that things like depression and anxiety are real because they were taught that they weren't real. And so, and it's not just parents and children. I mean, it's friends as well. You might grow up with someone and they start behaving in a manner that you feel like, I know this person. Why can't I get through to them? Why is it that I can't reason with this person anymore? Why are they doing things that don't make sense? Why are they destroying their own life? And I think some movies do a good job of portraying that, and some don't. A good example would be Beautiful Boy, and that's with addiction more so than mental illness. But
That's
you
the one
see
with
in that
Steve
movie,
Carell, right?
yes, and
Yeah, that was
I'm
good.
sure that movie, it has things for addicts. I'm sure addicts could watch that movie and get something out of it. But I think that movie's really made for people who have lost people to addiction, because the real emotional points of that film are the father, Steve Carell, just struggling with why he can't understand his son, why he just can't possibly imagine why his son would destroy his own life for these drugs, to the point where the father even takes methamphetamine to try to understand. And so yeah, I think that that's uh, a really important thing to consider if you are going to create a piece of art with a mentally ill character, is think about the people around them, not just the character themselves.
Well, I think a bad example, and I love this movie by the way, but a bad example would be Joker, the 2019 film, just because first of all, they within the marketing and the lead up to the film, it was clear that they were putting a large emphasis on we are going to depict this mental illness as accurately as possible. And I forget the name, but they incorporated the illness where you uncontrollably laugh or cry within the film. And of course, real people are afflicted by that. They chose to include that among other things, and hallucinations and general schizophrenia. So they're taking that serious subject matter that affects a considerable amount of people, and the movie is basically saying society has given up on you. If you try to better yourself, society is still going to take advantage of you, and the alternative or the option that you have is to kill them and cause as much havoc and damage as possible. Of course, I know that it's a superhero, or sorry, supervillain movie, and I'm not like angry at the movie, and I can differentiate a supervillain piece of art from like what somebody's actually telling society to do. But at the same time, if I put myself in the shoes of somebody who is mentally ill and thinks that society has given up on them, I feel like it could honestly be kind of dangerous to make a piece of art that's like, here, this guy is kind of similar to you, and he got out of this situation by murdering people on live TV. All I'm saying is you have to
It's
be
certainly
careful.
dangerous.
I'm just saying you have to be careful. I'm
Yeah,
not mad at the movie. I think it's actually a great movie. I've seen it multiple times. I enjoy it, but I don't know. You have to be careful with your messaging.
yeah, I feel similarly that that is a deeply dark film. It is a deeply disturbing film. I don't think that there is a silver lining in that film. Uh,
Foreshadowing.
yeah, foreshadowing for what we're going to talk about here in a minute. Uh, but it is a good film, and that that's kind of an interesting question of like, can you make a good piece of art that actually just makes people feel bad? Uh, I think the answer is probably yes, and it's certainly effective at making people feel bad. The first time I watched that, I came away just I felt so off for like 2 days. Uh,
If Joker wasn't about like a Batman villain, if it was just a movie about like a mentally ill, depressed, like schizophrenic man in society getting like trodden on, and then at the very end he kills somebody on live TV and starts like a riot within the city, I actually would enjoy that. But the fact that it's like tied to like a kid's character, and you know that there's so many eyes on it when it comes out, it makes it a little different in my opinion.
I was going to say something along the lines of art and how it makes you feel. I think the whole point of it is to feel something. You don't always have to feel joy from the art. You can feel sadness, you can feel anger, you can feel betrayal. I mean, the whole point, I think, is just to feel. I think that's what makes art really good art.
I 100% agree with that.
I always try to find movies that disturb me. I really, that's a feeling that I don't feel often in life, just from day to day life. So I actively look for films that will make me feel like sick and disturbed and scared. I haven't found a film that scares me since I was like a child, but I do look for it all the time. So I don't want to just feel joy. Like I don't want to just listen to feel good stories and see the guy get the girl in the end and stuff. I honestly don't really care about that too much. I'd rather I want the director to make me feel bad.
I
I think
sometimes want the bad guy to win.
Oh, I always do.
I think a lot of
So
people feel that way. I certainly for a long time sought out sort of the darkest, most disturbing films I could find, and I don't necessarily enjoy them as much as I used to, but I think there is something more to that, which may be that disturbing things that make you feel disturbed and dark and they take you to a dark place. I think it can also help you to see your own life in a more positive light. If you're always watching movies where the characters are just perfect angels and everything works out for them and everyone's Goldilocks happy, and then you look at your own life and in comparison it's just gray and drab, versus if you watch something where you see just how horrifically bad things can get, and then you look at your own life and in comparison it's like, wow, I've got it pretty good. It's like what they say, the stars shine brightest in the darkest nights, something along those lines.
You just called me out.
What?
I just talked about how I like the darkest, most disturbing movies, and you're like, oh yeah, I think that people with like gray, drab lives will seek those out because their lives won't seem so bad in comparison. And you're right. You would
That's
be
not what I
correct.
said,
You
Will.
would
That's
be
not what I
correct.
said. I said
that's
that
what
a
I heard.
regular person's life, in comparison to the rom coms where everything is perfect and works out, can appear gray, and compared to dark, disturbing films, it can appear colorful and less bad. I think that applies to most people.
If you
I
live a
agree.
good life and everything goes your way, you're never going to appreciate that if you don't know what the other side looks like. So there's a point to watching movies like that. I see valid reasons to watch a movie that's dark and disturbed, and then you're like, that's kind of messed up. maybe I do have it good, like you said. You appreciate it more. Whereas the opposite of that, if you're living a gray life or a not so shitty life, and you see a movie where everything's up and everybody lives happily ever after, maybe sometimes you might get hope from that. My life could be like that, or something along those lines. Like I said, I think the whole point is to feel something, one direction or the other.
Okay, so guys, we all watched some films this week. Some of us different films from others that were sort of adjacent to this conversation that we're having. Uh, so just to lay out kind of which ones we're going to talk about, I watched Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Silver Linings Playbook. How about you, Kevin?
I watched It's Kind of a Funny Story and about 80% of Prozac Nation.
And Will, you watched the same ones that I did, correct?
Yeah, we both watched Eternal Sunshine and Silver Linings Playbook.
So we're going to go through those in just a little bit more detail, and how we think, sort of what their contributions are to the mental illness conversation. Kevin, would you like to start with one of them that you watched?
Sure. Let's start with It's Kind of a Funny Story. It is about a teenage boy who struggling with anxiety over school, whatnot. His parents put on him a lot of pressure to do well, and stress and anxiety gets to him, and he processes the idea of self-harming. So to prevent himself from hurting himself, he goes to a doctor and admits himself into a psych ward, an adult psych ward, because for some odd reason the adolescent one is closed. So he spends some time relating to patients on the psych ward who have their own issues, and comes to realize that his issues aren't as bad as he was anxious about. He learns to cope with it, meets some interesting people along the way that he helps, as well as them helping him. And in the end, obviously, he doesn't find a cure, but he finds a way to cope and to effectively manage his illness a lot better. I could go into more detail, but I think that's basically the gist of the movie. I thought it was a decent movie.
So did you feel like it was a realistic portrayal of what it was trying to address?
Um, I want to say yes. It's been a long time since I've been that age where, you're going through high school trying to, apply for colleges and do well. And it is a lot of pressure, and I can see how the anxiety gets to you. So it was a very fair portrayal of the feelings that teenagers go through. I kind of wish that when I was that age, I would have had those kind of options to help me along the way, because I know I went through those same anxieties. I wanted to go to a good school. I wanted to get a scholarship so I can get out of my crap life and stop living in a poor part of town. So I understand the anxiety that he goes through. I never did have the issues with self-harm back then, though. I never let it get to me that much, but it was good to see the perspective on that and how it does affect people in different ways.
So what would you say was like the main conflict of the film, and how did the main character overcome it, or did they overcome it?
Well, the main conflict was he was, as I said, trying to do well in school, trying to get into a good college. Uh, Another thing he was trying to do was his best friend was just like a star. Everybody loved him. He was not, I don't want to say jealous, but he was trying to live up to what his best friend portrayed as what kind of person he wanted to be. So there's a lot of stress there as well, and he was just overwhelmed with anxiety, trying to fit somewhere he thought he was supposed to fit into. And by the end of the movie, he realized that he fits into his own place, that he doesn't need to fit into these places with these other people. And no, he doesn't. Like I said, he doesn't overcome it. He doesn't get healed or cured with it, but he learns how to cope with it and manage it and create his own space. The other movie I watched was Prozac Nation, which is somewhat similar along the lines of the theme, except this time she is a college student. She's a very prolific writer. She gets a scholarship to Harvard to be a journalist. Even wins an award early on in the first semester for one of her writing, one of her articles that she wrote. But soon after that, she gets writer's block and she's unable to come up with anything creative after that. Uh, she starts abusing substances. Flashbacks in the movie show that she's dealing with depression because her parents divorced and her father disappeared 4 years prior to college. So she's dealing with that. She also um, copes by random sex with random people in the dorm. Um, she actually starts seeing a not psychologist, psychiatrist who prescribes Prozac to her, and that's how um, she learns to cope with her illness. But through medication, and in the end, she does improve for the better, but she still has to take the medication. As I said, I did not watch the end of that movie, but through what I saw, she was improving with the medication.
That's definitely a tough topic to address. And I do think that a lot of movies fall short, movies and shows. I think they kind of some can fall short of fully encompassing what a personality altering drug does. Um, and they usually at least try to address it. But in reality, when you start taking medication that changes your mood, a lot of people find it to be they stop feeling like themselves, and they might improve in some areas, and they might really get worse in other areas. And of course, this is where you try different medications, you try different dosages, and there's a whole thing. But I think sometimes films will sort of just say like, oh, and then they got on medication and then they were better. Uh,
Yeah,
and that may sometimes be the case. I think it's usually not.
and that's a good point because um, taking the medication, even if it starts to work and you start feeling better, you don't feel like yourself because you're so used to feeling bad for so long that it is scary. Those medications can be scary even when they're effective.
Yeah, and well, one of the most common sort of complaints is just like not feeling sharp, feeling like you're fuzzy. And I mean, some of these drugs, I'm not super educated on them, but some of them really are just kind of like uh not tranquilizers, but they basically just calm you down. But that can also mean that you can't feel like energetic, and so you just always feel flat. People will say, "I feel flat," um, and yeah, that's one thing that happens in one of the movies that Will and I watched, Silver Linings Playbook. And this is an example where I think that they tried to have a slightly nuanced take on medication and kind of failed. So, uh, Will, do you want to give a synopsis of that movie and then we can start talking about it?
Yeah, sure. So Silver Linings Playbook has to do with the a guy Pat. He is the main character. He has just recently gotten out of a mental health facility after attacking the man who was having an affair with his wife. So he does his time in it's like a mental health facility slash prison. He's in custody essentially, but it's not just like prison. He's there. He's seeing a doctor, and he is eventually allowed to be released by the courts. He's taken back home. He is still married. Obviously, the marriage is shattered because his wife cheated on him and then left him, but he's still operating under this delusion that he is going to get back with her. So he has been formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And throughout this film, it's very evident that he is affected almost every hour in some form or fashion by this condition. So, to an extent, the mental illness is the forefront of this movie. It follows the plot directly. It's always intertwined with the plot. But in terms of medication, Pat is very against taking any form of medicine. He says that in the past it's made him fuzzy and foggy and not like himself. So he's created this methodology where he works out, goes on runs, and uses these mental exercises to avoid becoming angry or having an episode because he doesn't want to take medication.
But he does start taking it, correct?
Yeah.
Early on in the film, like you said, he expresses that he doesn't take medicine specifically because it makes him feel foggy, like he's not himself, and of course, he's having manic episodes. Mostly what we see in the film, I think, of manifestations of his bipolar is mania, where he just doesn't sleep basically at all, and he's just in this hyperactive state. I think they do a decent job of portraying that, at least in terms of the writing for it. But what happens is, later on in the film, he is convinced to start taking his medication, and from that point on, he might as well not have bipolar at all or be on medication. In my opinion, at least the way that I watch the movie, it's like as soon as he starts taking that medicine, about halfway through the film, he never has any mental issues at all. He's like totally put together. And I just feel like they started to have an interesting take on that, and then they just kind of left it as soon as he started taking the medicine.
So him taking the medication wasn't actually really emphasized in the film. So I'm actually kind of struggling to remember. Like they definitely didn't put a spotlight on him taking the medication. I know he took it after he had that huge fight with his father and it woke
Right.
up the whole neighborhood. I know for a fact, but is there even another scene that shows him taking it after that? I kind of don't think
No,
there is.
there's not, and that it's insinuated. It seems that it's insinuated that he just starts taking it because after that event, he hits his mom and his dad, and gets hit by his dad a couple times, and it's such a disruptive event that he's like, fine, okay, I'll start taking it, and it never talks about it or shows it again. He never says that it's negatively affecting him. He never says it's positively affecting him, but we never see him in a state of mania again in the film, or depression. And so I feel like they fell short in that aspect. But also, terrible segue, but I also just kind of think that movie is bad all around. And you guys may disagree with me on this, but I think that there's a lot of issues with the film. I think probably number one is casting. It's Bradley Cooper, right, is the lead?
Mhm.
Right, okay. He's a good actor. I think he's just entirely the wrong person for this role. I think what he does best is portraying an extremely intelligent, put together, razor sharp guy. This is why he was so great for Limitless, is because he's able to portray. Yeah, he portrays a genius, just very put together person very, very well. When he is in these sort of manic states in the film, I don't believe it. I don't see the character. I don't see someone in a manic episode. I see someone pretending to have a manic episode. And the same with Jennifer Lawrence. I just don't believe her character at all. And that's partially due to her acting, but also partially due to the writing. Have you guys heard of Kid Snippets?
No.
Okay, it's an old YouTube show where basically what they did for this YouTube show is they got together groups of kids 5 to 10 years old and would record them having a conversation or playing pretend. And then they would reenact it with adult actors just mouthing using the audio from the kids having the conversation. And
Oh, I think I've seen those videos.
yeah, so it'll be like two adults in the drive-through, and it's like actually kids talking, and so it's just completely nonsensical. That is what half the dialogue in this film felt like to me. It literally, the way that Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper speak to each other, I feel like it's literally like they recorded two 8-year-olds having an argument and then they just made that the script. That's how I felt about it. But Will or Kevin, feel free to disagree.
I mean, it was obviously exaggerated for some sort of effect, but I don't think it ruined the film. I mean, I enjoyed it. I don't even have a justification other than I enjoyed the dialogue. I mean, it definitely grabbed my attention. I'm not going to say it was like masterfully written or anything, but I didn't have the same issue as you where the characters did actually feel believable to me. Bradley Cooper, I mostly know him from The Hangover, so I mean, that's a comedy film that's a way different. That's just completely different in its entirety. So with this, I didn't have any problems seeing him as like a deeply troubled man. Maybe I have an issue with like reading between the lines, but I definitely took it at face value and I didn't question it. I think they did, or he did a good job portraying what he was meant to portray. Now, I will say, you mentioning that sort of halfway or 75% of the way through the film, he just sort of stops being mentally ill. And like, that's a valid criticism, I would say. But also at this time, he's realized that he's fallen in love with Jennifer Lawrence. Up until this point in the film, it's clear that he's like deeply um, hurt over what happened with his wife. I mean, he's like living in a constant delusion, like I need to get her back, I need to get Nikki back. He's just constantly thinking and talking about her. But as soon as he starts to fall in love with Jennifer Lawrence, with Tiffany, that sort of fades away. And I actually kind of thought that was a smooth transition to where you as the viewer are like, okay, he's falling in love with her clearly, and then he stops having the episodes. And it's actually like kind of up to your own interpretation if he's still taking the medicine. I know that he takes it that one time, but it never shows him taking it again after that. So he might not even be taking it. It could just be pure love driving his recovery. And I actually think that that's what the film was intending to say. So I know you disliked it, but given what I just said, did that make you like it more or kind of see where I'm coming from, Alex?
Let me put it this way. Eh, Or actually, I'll pose it to you a question, which is what do you think is a lesson from the film, or what do you think the film is trying to say? And I know there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but spoiler for me, I can't answer that question. I have no clue what that film is supposed to say about anything. But I'm interested to hear your perspective.
Again, if you take it at face value, it's clearly just saying cut out the negativity from your past, cut out the people who have hurt you. You're clearly going to need to work on yourself. And if you do that, if you actively put effort into working on yourself, you will find love in this case, because this is a love story. I mean, they show the character, the Silver Linings Playbook is his playbook for not blowing up and having a bipolar episode. And he tries his best to follow that to a T, and he meets someone and eventually falls in love with her, and they presumably live happily ever after. I think it's clearly just trying to say, cut out the negativity from your past. You have to move on from things and people that hurt you. And if you just buy the book, try to live your life to the best that you possibly can, you will be able to recover and find love that way.
It's a good interpretation. I never knew you were a romantic, so good for you, man.
Thank you.
I can almost agree with parts of that. Like cutting out people that have wronged you in the past. It does occur in that movie, and it is the right thing to do, most likely, for him to cut ties with his wife. Um, I don't know. Maybe it's an amalgamation of a lot of things that caused me to not really get anything out of it. For instance, like the romance itself, I find to be not compelling in the slightest. Um, I think that they build the romance on a foundation of sex appeal almost entirely. Uh, their relationship starts with Jennifer Lawrence just like basically telling him that she will have sex with him, and throughout the film, there's lots of shots that are meant to highlight the sex appeal of Jennifer Lawrence, and there's almost nothing about her personality that is attractive in any sense. I don't think their personalities mesh. Uh, and she also does terrible things. She lies to him like about a really important thing, and somehow this is seen as okay, which is strange to me. Basically, I just found these characters unlikable. I found them unbelievable, and so maybe that's just preventing me from being able to see what the writers were trying to get at, because I just feel like they missed the mark in certain areas, and so I do sometimes kind of dismiss an entire film based on certain things that I dislike about it. So
I think the character, I think the Jennifer Lawrence's character Tiffany is very close to being a real person. I mean, I feel like I've met her before or had a conversation with her before, and I don't really think that's a sign that she was well written. I just think it's a sign that as a character type, as an archetype, that's a common type of person. Um, I mean,
really,
she's a self-described she how can I say this in the most polite way possible? She essentially says that she had a very sexually promiscuous past. Um, she is dealing with an intense loss, actually more so than Bradley Cooper's character. She's dealing with the death of the man she was with. She is constantly pursued by creepy men throughout the film, and she, to an extent, uses their attention to make herself feel better, when in reality that's just making herself feel worse. Like, the only point I'm trying to make here is these are very real issues that a lot of women have to deal with. And I get what you're saying about, she's not inherently likable, but people, like, when you're addressing a problem that people have to face, it's probably not going to be pretty, and you're going to have to get your hands dirty essentially. And I get how a character can ruin a film, but like, I took all of those qualities she had and it just made me feel like this is real. This is a real person to me. And a real person would lie. A real person would lie if they thought that they were interacting with somebody who could potentially be their next husband or the love of their life. They would lie. Like, maybe I would fake a letter to somebody. I don't know. It just seemed really real to me. So I didn't hate it. Am I sort of winning you
interesting.
over, or do you still hate it?
Not at all. I'm sorry.
It's okay,
It's
man.
it's an interesting thing when two people just get completely different things out of a movie. It's almost like two people had the same meal and one of them disliked it and one of them liked it. How do you convince someone who didn't like the food that they just ate that they should like the food that they just ate? It's impossible. Um, and as much as I would like to think that there are objective discussions that can be had about uh, about film, um, it requires a great degree of skill. Uh, like Gordon Ramsay could explain to someone why their opinion about a food is incorrect, but your average Joe cannot. And I definitely, um, I think that you and I are not going to be able to really win each other over on this one.
Well, Gordon Ramsay could explain to somebody like a technical mistake about the food, but if it's all at a five-star level at that point, it's just up to interpretation and how you enjoyed it. Like, Gordon Ramsay can't tell another like world-renowned chef like, "Hey, you did everything correct, but it sucks." Like, he would just have to respect that they were also on the same level as them and like knew what they were doing, and at that point it would just be a difference of opinion. Like, I'm not trying to tell you, like, you and I aren't pointing out mistakes to each other. I just think it was a film about two broken people coming together and finding a way to heal each other, and I think that's beautiful.
I think that they're
Well,
gonna break up like 2 days after the film ended in like a fiery disaster. I think their relationship is terrible. I
Hey,
think
they
it's
didn't.
well,
terrible and unhealthy.
whether you like the film or not, Bradley Cooper was nominated for an Oscar for that role, and Jennifer Lawrence also was nominated, but she won Best Actress for that role. So most people, I guess, liked it. So Alex, you are in the minority.
I'm
There's
always in the
nothing wrong with
minority.
that, though. There's nothing wrong with that because that's the whole point of enjoying art. Not everybody's going to enjoy the same art. I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I can't remember if I liked it a lot at all. I don't. I remember parts of it as you guys rehashed the movie itself. I do know that I liked Bradley Cooper. I liked Jennifer Lawrence, so it was worth a watch. I haven't watched it again, so it probably wasn't that good. So,
Well, I haven't
Uh-oh.
watched it again until today, and I really liked it. I think a very strong aspect of that film is that the Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence are the
Hello.
two like mentally ill characters of the film, but every single character has their own like substantial issues and pretty obvious issues. And I thought that was a great inclusion. It's not like the real world is like, okay, there's all the normal people, and then there's the two mentally ill people that just stand out like a sore thumb. In this film, there was two people
mhm.
that had issues, and Bradley Cooper had been diagnosed and was seeing a doctor, but everybody was messed up, and that's really close to real life. So I respected that.
And I agree with that to some extent. It's once again, I just came away with a bad taste in my mouth because I felt like it didn't really have any prescriptions for how people should act. For instance, I think most people in the film act in a very, very, very bad manner, and the film doesn't really address that the things that they're doing are bad, which makes me wonder if the writers even think that the things they're doing are bad. For instance, like the father gambling for his main source of income and putting like their life savings on the line for a bet, and then it works out for them, and it's all happily ever after. I'm like, really? Like we're promoting gambling? I don't understand. And I felt the same way with like I think everything that the all of the actions that the characters do are not good actions, but they work out for them. So it's like the film is saying you should act in the way that they did act, and I disagree.
I think the whole
Wasn't the
father
dad
gambling,
Robert De Niro?
yeah. I think
Yes.
Okay.
I think the whole dad gambling thing was just supposed to be a parallel between the final act where Pat and Tiffany dance together in the competition. The bet is just symbology like, hey, you were the old Nikki was there, his ex-wife was there. So it's like you are leaving your past behind and taking a complete gamble on a new future with this new girl. So I just thought the whole gambling thing was just symbology and supposed to be like a parallel.
So yeah, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This is one that I do have a lot of respect for this film. Uh, I, in terms of letter grade, it's an A plus for me. Uh, and it has a lot going for it. So one thing that it has going for it is that it's a very unique way to tell a story. It if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. This is one that I actually don't want to spoil, uh, too badly. So if if you haven't seen it, definitely go give it a watch. But um, it has very interesting twists in it, in the way that the story is told. But
Wait,
it's
wait, wait.
about
You can talk about the twist and the everything. We're gonna have to spoil it heavily. We can put a disclaimer, of course, but like there's no way to get around the spoilers.
You're right. You're right. Tell you what,
I think the
just
biggest
take
spoiler
that
is the
out.
fact that all three of us actually liked that movie.
It's good. Pretty good
A
movie.
rare
Yeah,
a rare thing.
really good movie.
Okay, just pretend I said nothing. I'll restart.
We
Okay,
can edit that out.
edit and post. Take it out and post. Okay. So yeah, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This is a movie that I do like. quite a bit. And I think that of all the movies we have discussed, mental illness is probably less prevalent in the film compared to the others. Uh, it is certainly a romance, uh, and the people involved in the romance have issues, as all people do. Uh, and some of their issues certainly border on mental health, but I don't think that it's discussed super prevalently.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I actually saw for the first time today. Now, that's on a technicality because I started watching it, I remember when I was a kid, but I was way too young to grasp the adult concepts that were trying to be explained. Just couldn't grasp it whatsoever. I was probably like six. I think I was like 6 years old when it came out. So
God,
obviously,
you guys are
right
getting
over my head.
old.
Right over my head.
I was an adult when that movie came out.
Yeah, I wasn't. But I watched it today and I think it was a great film. It deals with a man named Joel who is sort of living and reminiscing through a failed relationship that he had with a girl named Clementine. Now, both characters figure out that there's a medical procedure they can take to completely wipe their minds clean of any memories of their relationship. And since it ended in a bad way with sort of an explosive fight, they both choose to do this organically apart from each other. So the film is not told in a linear way. So the best way I can describe what happens is that both characters erase their memories and then drastically scramble to get those memories back because they realize that that's not what they wanted to do. So it's told in a very unique way. I love the cinematography. It's very hard to explain verbally, so I recommend watching the film. So with that being said, there's going to be a lot of heavy spoilers. If you don't want to get this film like completely spoiled into the ground for yourself, just give it a watch and then come back to this video.
Yeah, definitely. We all like this movie, and if you have not watched it and you're watching this video, I think I speak for all of us when we say go ahead and close down the video and go watch the movie, but not before you like and subscribe and comment.
Yeah, just keep us open in the other tab, go watch the movie, and then come back.
Exactly.
Alex and Kevin, so you guys obviously have seen this movie before today. Did you always like the film and have you seen it multiple times?
I've seen it, I think, 3 times, and yeah, I very much like the film. I liked it the first time I saw it. The first time, I definitely didn't understand the full story until the very end, which I think is kind of how they meant it to be taken. And then it has a lot of rewatch value because when you rewatch it with the knowledge of the twists that are in the story, you pick up on a lot of things that you didn't necessarily the first time you watched it. But I think this movie is extremely romantic. I think it's anytime that you can build a really compelling romance without devolving into just like sex appeal and things like that. I think that shows that there's some real quality to the writing, and I think there's a lot of analogies in the film. There's a lot of analogies in the film, and some of it I don't necessarily know if I fully actually understand. I'm interested to hear you guys' perspective. For instance, so one of the main topics of the film is that people are able to just erase their memories of other people or other things. Um, so if they have a breakup or they had a loss that they just can't mentally cope with, they just can go to the clinic and forget that it ever happened. And of course, this is not healthy, and that's something I think everyone just intuitively understands. Is that like this is not a good thing to be able to do that. Um, but I'm interested if you guys think that it's an analogy for anything else, or if it's just there for sort of a plot device.
I think it was more satirical than anything. Obviously, you can't go and erase your memories, but um, In a way, we kind of sometimes wish we could. After a bad breakup, we wish we could go back and erase everything that happened and not remember the bad times and not remember this person that broke our heart. So I could see the perspective there. The whole adventure going through and trying to reclaim those memories when you realize that it's not what you wanted. I thought that was great. I thought the way it jumped back and forth. The first time I watched it was a little confusing because it jumped, between spots. Uh, but by the end, it all circles together, and you realize that it was all meant to be that way, and it worked out. And I have seen this movie several times. Not always intentionally. Sometimes it's just on, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I'll watch that. That works." I thought it was an excellent movie. Obviously, the acting was good. I love Jim Carrey. So it's good that I love seeing him in some serious roles sometimes, but he was a little goofy as well, so his personality shown.
Well, within the film itself, they sort of equate the memory erasing technique to a night of heavy drinking. So that's kind of its link to the real world. You know, somebody has a bad breakup, they're going to try to drink their pain away. That's kind of a common trope. So I don't know if there's necessarily, if the memory procedure itself is anything other than a plot device, but if there were a real world tie, it would just be heavy drinking, drug use, things that would cause brain
I believe,
damage.
yeah, I believe it was an analogy itself. So
Well, yeah, so here's a perspective that I had, and I don't necessarily fully think this. I just think it's kind of an interesting link that you maybe could draw. So, uh, one of the main themes of the film is that when you start to erase these memories, uh, and you're forced to, he's forced to sort of go through the memories as they're being deleted, and he realizes that it's despite all of the pain that the relationship caused him, the good memories are so valuable to him that it's more painful to lose them than to keep them. And I think that's a really, really powerful concept that, warts and all, everything that's happened in our past is a part of us, and it has value to us. But of course, if you choose to delete those memories, then you're just saying no, it's worthless, or it's a negative value. These things that I can remember that are a part of my past are a negative value, and I want to get rid of them. And I almost wonder if having your memory deleted could be an analogy for suicide in that film, which is basically just saying like, mm, these things are so bad that I would rather not exist than exist. I don't know if you guys think that that's at all possible.
I
I think that's what makes it good is that we interpret it that way, or that we also. I did not interpret it as suicide. Um, I felt it was an analogy. It was an open analogy for each individual person to interpret their own way. I thought it was really well done. And Will, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, you're good, man. It's open discussion. I was just gonna say, uh, I don't, I don't agree that it was meant to be like a, I don't know, a metaphor for suicide. I guess I don't agree with that because I think that the whole purpose of the film is just to show that grieving is necessary. You can only build yourself back up if you've properly grieved. And I think to my point, when I think when Joel is first entering the facility and inquiring about having his memory wiped, there's a woman in the waiting room who's holding a box of all of her belongings, and she has like a bunch of dog toys, dog collars, and stuff like that. And she's crying, and she's clearly trying to erase the memory that her dog, who has died, has ever existed, rather than dealing with the pain of her dog's death. And I think, again, that just goes with the theme of grief being necessary. And that's not even far into the film when Joel realizes that he's made a grave mistake. It's not like the very end and he's like, "What have I done?" It's like basically as soon as the procedure starts, he's like, "What am I doing? I need this to stop." So I think from very early on, they just established that, like, everything you go through in life, no matter how painful it is necessary to build yourself, and just to be a human being. It's part of the human experience, and it's unfortunate, but it's necessary.
There's definitely an aspect to the film which is sort of pointing at the not just the value of mourning, and keeping your painful memories so that you can process things and actually properly mourn, um, or cope with a loss of relationship. It also points towards the value that relationships have in the first place, and how um, when I think a lot of people have probably experienced ending a relationship and then having regret about it later. Um, and this is also something, again, with the suicide thing, even though I know this isn't necessarily what they intended, but people who try to kill themselves and fail oftentimes say that as soon as they, whatever it is, take the medication, jump off of the bridge, whatever it is, as soon as they make that choice that can't be taken back, it's like everything becomes clear. It's like, this is wrong. I shouldn't have done that. How, there's a great poem in BoJack Horseman, the show, called The View from Halfway Down, and it's about that very topic. And so, yeah, this film is sort of saying you should really give a relationship every possible chance you can for it to survive. And where this really comes to a head is at the end of the film, when Clementine and Joel have reunited, and they are listening to the tapes of them at the end of their relationship, before they had their memories erased, talking about each other in the most derogatory manner, just dismissive, just like basically the worst things you could ever hear your partner say about you. And yet they still decide to try again. They know the worst things about each other, and they still think we have a past, we are a part of each other, and we're gonna try and get through this. And I think that's a really good message. Certainly not applicable to every relationship. There are some relationships that should end. But yeah, that's one aspect of it.
Okay, so just to explain to the viewers what you're talking about a little bit, there's there's sort of like a deus ex machina within the film. There's a subplot of the the doctor from the facility is actually having an affair with one of his workers. And that subplot comes back around where the young woman worker who he was having an affair with sends out tapes that were never supposed to be sent out, that are all of these people's reasons for wanting their memories erased. So the main character, Joel, and his girlfriend, Clementine, receive these tapes, which sort of are the only catalyst for them eventually getting back together. They listen to these tapes and are initially very, very put off with all of the negative things that they've said about each other, but then they sort of realize, we've done this once, we've worked with this once, all of these negative aspects we're willing to put up with because I think that what we had together is worth it to pursue again. So the entire film is just basically PR for why you should get back with your ex-girlfriend.
Or it could be for people who are in a relationship that feels like it's dying, and maybe they have checked out mentally, and maybe it's a call for people to sort of reconsider and give it another shot.
There's actually two main subplots within this film. So one is the one that I just described to you, where the doctor, the head doctor of the facility, is having an affair. He's obviously a very immoral person, which sort of showcases the immorality of the whole procedure itself. There's also another subplot where this creepy little guy, played by Elijah Wood, who also works at the facility, has taken he's looked through all of Joel's belongings that Joel mentally associated with Clementine. So Elijah Wood's character has looked through all of this, and he's essentially trying to become Joel. So he thought Clementine was attractive when she came in to get the procedure done, and he essentially tries to become Joel so that he can steal her love away. And he literally like introduces himself to Clementine after she's had her memory wiped. Elijah Wood intentionally tries to follow the same path that Joel followed to win her love. And initially, like they kind of go on some dates, but she just becomes extremely disgusted with him. And I think that I'm so glad they included that subplot in the movie because it's saying when you fall in love with somebody, you're not falling in love with a situation, you're not falling in love with an action, you're falling in love with them as a person. So if somebody else came in and did the exact same stuff, it doesn't matter. It could be it's not interchangeable. The people aren't interchangeable. The person is the most important part. So you're falling in love with a person, not an action or sweet nothings. Like there's one scene where he's like, "I love you so much. I love you." So Elijah Wood's laying in bed beside Clementine, and he's like, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I've never felt happy before you." And this is like exactly what Joel said, but when Clementine hears it from Elijah Wood, she's like, "This is wrong. This is disgusting," and she gets up and runs away. Alex, what do you think about that subplot?
Well, I think part of the reason that it wasn't working is not just that it's a different person who didn't have the same chemistry with Clementine, but also because Clementine did have sort of subconscious remnants of her memories with Joel. Both Joel and Clementine in the movie, they try to fight their memories being erased, but they fail. Their memories are erased, but there's little inklings left behind. And so like Elijah Wood gets a call from Clementine and she's saying like everything is wrong. I don't know why, but I feel like everything is off. I don't understand. I'm confused. And his solution is to take her and reenact a date that she went on with Joel. And he says an exact line that Joel said because he's a creep. And as soon as he says the line, she like stands up. She's like, "I'm leaving. I have to get out of here." And so I think that she's sort of picking up that this sort of strange deja vu, like realizing that something is really, really wrong. That I do think overall that subplot is not as good as the main romance and maybe unnecessary for the film, but it's a little bit of comic relief because Elijah Wood's character is just so ridiculously pathetic. It's kind of funny. But
Yeah, and like he steals her panties at one point from Joel's stuff, which is I'm glad they added that subplot because I think it's comic relief and it's also it's like I like the point they're trying to make with it.
yeah, I don't think it detracts from the film. Um,
I like that you mentioned the subplots. I mean, you could have had a good movie without the subplots, but the subplots made it a lot better. The fact that Elijah Wood played that character so well that you end up hating that character was pretty good. Mark Ruffalo was also in the movie. He did pretty well. I forget who played the doctor, but he played it so well that you ended up hating that guy too. Kirsten Dunst was the person that he had the affair with. She was good in the role. I think the plot twist at the end where he had forced the procedure on her before, that one I kind of didn't see coming. So that was a really good plot twist. Uh, uh, for that sake, the fact that it struck me by surprise because I usually expect stuff like that. I kind of see stuff coming. All in all, the movie was great. I loved the different plots that were strung up in one movie. I love how it bounced back and forth, so you didn't really you couldn't really expect anything because it was all over the place. And I love how it circled around at the end and everything made sense.
I didn't actually think they had that much chemistry. I feel like Pat and Tiffany from Silver Linings Playbook have more chemistry than Joel and Clementine, to be honest with you.
can't imagine, can't imagine what it's like to be in your head.
You really don't feel the same way?
Not at all. Well, I mean, we could both kind of describe how we see the relationship. So, like for Joel and Clementine, what I see is like you have an awkward very uh very introverted person, who is Joel. And uh I think that he wants a little bit of excitement in his life, but he's just sort of too socially awkward to really seek it out. He's just kind of comfortable being in his own little world and journaling. And then you have Clementine, who is pretty much the polar opposite. She's very outgoing, very experimental, very adventurous, but she's also kind of all over the place. And Joel to her is this sort of an enigmatic, stoic figure who kind of keeps her tied down. So in terms of relationship, I see Clementine as the kite and Joel as the string. And you see in their relationship some of the positive aspects. You see that Joel's most playful side comes out around Clementine, where they have play fights, or he'll lay on the floor and put ketchup on his throat and pretend to be dead and things like that. He wants to make her happy, but I also think that the negative aspects of their relationship are very real. In that ultimately Clementine needs external stimulus. She needs excitement in her life, and Joel isn't really able to provide that. He's a homebody, and she wants to go out and have fun and drink, and that just doesn't work. And she also likes to talk all the time, and Joel does not, and that's a source of conflict for them. So I see both the things that draw them together and the things that push them apart as totally believable, and that's about it.
Well, that's exactly why I think they're not compatible. I mean, I don't necessarily see Joel as like a very stable figure. He's just quiet and reserved, so you can easily mistake that for stable. But he has problems expressing himself and regulating his emotions. And the reason they initially break up is because he sort of blows up and breaks through his shell and says something that he doesn't mean to say, and it just completely turns her off, in part because she's not even really used to him speaking up. He has trouble showing affection, which was a problem that Clementine had during the film. And I'm not saying that she doesn't have her own problems, but I think the way that both of their issues sort of line up, she's much more outward and explosive, and kind of she can get sloppy drunk and like too assertive, and Joel is just like inward, not expressive, not he's too rigid, and he's also prone to exploding and saying things he doesn't mean to say. I just Obviously within the film they're written to be together, so I can't really argue against that, but I'm saying like those two archetypes together in real life, I've seen that time and time again. The guy who basically just sits there and takes it forever until he finally explodes because he's not emotionally stable. I mean, I just I don't really think they're I don't really think they're compatible.
They may not be compatible, and that's really sad. But I guess it's believable to me, and I think when I say that they have chemistry, it's not so much that it's like, oh yes, they're so good together, and I want them to be together. It's more so like I emotionally follow them being together. Their interactions between this kind of awkward guy that wants to talk to girls but is too scared to, and this girl who is extroverted enough to talk to him, but he's not giving her the response that she's expecting, and she finds that intriguing. That he's not acting like guys usually do when I do this, and then them their slow transformation from sort of the honeymoon phase of a relationship into this sort of more day to day, this is normal, and things start to get boring. That's something that probably every relationship ever is a real issue. And like I said, it's just believable. And so, yeah, so to contrast that, my experience with Silver Linings Playbook, the from the very beginning of their interactions, they're just they clash, in my opinion, and not in a good way. Like to try to follow the beginning of the relationship in Silver Linings Playbook, they meet at a dinner party, and the girl, sorry, what's the character's names again
The
in
main
Silver
character
Linings?
in Silver Linings, it's
Yeah,
Pat and Tiffany.
Pat and Tiffany. Okay, so Tiffany basically says, "I'm gonna leave this dinner party early. Pat, walk me home." And then they walk home, and she's like, "Pat, you can come in and have sex with me if you want." And he's like, "What?" He's disgusted by this. He's like, "No, I have a wife. Like, what are you doing?" And then later, she starts like chasing him while they're running. She's just stalking him, and she's like multiple times just chasing him down the road. He's just trying to escape. And then finally, he realizes that he can use her to get to his wife, which he really wants to do. And they make a deal where he is gonna basically learn a dance with her, and in return, she will deliver a letter to his wife, which is violating his restraining order. And she doesn't actually do that. She lies to him about that. But they do learn the dance together, and the whole time he's just like total brick wall to her. He's like, "We're friends. I'm doing this for my wife. I'm doing this for my wife. I don't care about you. We're just friends." And there's lots of shots of her being sexy. And then at the end of the movie, he just gets with her. That's my perspective on that relationship. And it makes no sense to me. I don't like it. I hate it.
Well, him constantly doing the like, "Hey, we're just friends" thing, that wasn't that was just to convince himself that he wasn't having feelings for her. Literally within 10 seconds of meeting her, there's a scene where Pat stares down at Tiffany's cleavage and then averts his eyes quickly. And even in the final scene, he says, "I loved you since the first time I saw you." So him saying all that throughout the film, the second half of the film saying like, we're just friends," that's him trying to convince himself. But they actually do include scenes that show that he's growing fond of her in a romantic way, like when his friend, I forgot his name, comes into the dance studio and sort of dancing with them, and he tries to show Tiffany a dance, and he puts his hand on her waist, and Pat's like, "No, no, no, okay, we get it, we get it, we get it," and then he kind of like shoos him off, and I'm like, okay, you're definitely romantically attracted to this girl. I mean, even on its face, like for him to go to those dance lessons, I know that he convinced himself that this is going to get me to my wife, but he could always just go find another way to get to his wife. I mean, he was interested in Tiffany. That's kind of like apparent throughout the film. I don't think they just like randomly sprung it on the audience. I think they at least planted enough seeds for me to be into it. We just have different opinions about that movie, don't we?
Very much so.
Like, I feel like we're just not going to get through to each other on it. I guess the final consensus is I like it and you don't. And that's okay. But I'll say this though, I can see your perspective that he kind of just like it's sudden. Their romance is sudden. And I think that's what you were just kind of saying, and I grant you that. I think it was a little bit more well set up than you said, but I'll grant you that.
I've said my piece.
Yeah, how should we conclude? Cut to black in the middle of a sentence?
Yeah, do the Soprano ending.
Okay, I'll do it. Hold on. All right, it's over. Cut to black.